Welcome. Today we're going to be testing five more high-end games on the iPhone 17 Pro Max. Now, please note for this video, I want to focus more on older AAA and console PC type games just because, I don't know, that's just what I want to do. And I think, I don't know, I'd like to see more games like this on mobile because they run well. Anyway, let's get to it. So our first game to look at is Resident Evil 7, the oldest RE title on Apple devices. Because of its age, it runs exceptionally well on mobile. The game offers a few graphical options, but they are limited. You can only adjust the graphics preset and screen resolution and some post-processing effects. Using the Prioritize Performance preset, the game runs up to 60 FPS at the max resolution of 2796 by 1290. Interestingly, this preset does not use metal effects. Instead, Capcom applies 70% scaling, meaning the game actually renders at 1957 by 903 and then upscales that to native resolution. This approach improves image quality at lower resolutions compared to metal effects, which can create ghosting and blockiness. On the A19 Pro, the game is pretty much locked at 60 FPS. The only minor performance hiccup occurs, for me, during the Marguerite Baker boss fight when using the flamethrower in particular, where GPU frame times briefly exceed 16 milliseconds, and also the thermal state reaches serious in this particular scene. Overall, this is strong performance, even if it's not running at native resolution. The Prioritize Graphics preset uses metal effects temporal upscaling and targets 30 FPS. At max resolution on this device, the scaling input res is 1166 by 538, the scaling target res is 2332 by 1076, and the output matches the device's native resolution. The A19 Pro handles this locked 30 FPS easily. While metal effects usage in the background allows for smooth performance, it would be nice if Capcom offered more flexible options like we see in RE2 and RE3 with metal effects, as I think this phone could handle higher resolutions with metal effects. GPU frame times here often reach around 30 ms, which is solid. Currently, there's little reason to use balanced preset on this device, since it also targets 30 FPS, which is identical to graphics mode, and runs at the same metal effects resolutions. Ideally, I would really love if Capcom could enable balance mode to run at 40 FPS, as seen on M series iPads, which offer a noticeably smoother experience, such as here on my M1 iPad Pro. It obviously is running the game at a much lower resolution than my iPhone 17 Pro Max, which is really cool to think about. Even a jump from 30 to 40 FPS can make a dramatic difference, similar to console performance modes. We mustn't forget about Resident Evil 3. Built on the same engine as RE2, this game is actually a bit more demanding, which you might be surprised by, mainly because much of the gameplay takes place outdoors, which puts more strain on the A19 Pro chip. To maintain 60 FPS on the Prioritize Performance preset, I need to play at 900p with metal effects set to quality. The trade-off is that both metal effects quality and performance use 50% scaling. For some reason, with this port, I find metal effects usage is pretty good and it's actually not very noticeable at super low resolutions compared to like Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 4, and so forth. So I still think this is pretty good. For me, it's actually amazing to play a fairly modern AAA game like this on a phone at 60 FPS consistently. Playing at 1080p isn't ideal, as the phone quickly throttles with the thermal state hitting serious within just minutes, and the frame rate is not enjoyable. The device reaches around 50 degrees at this resolution. It would be good if the in-game graphical options contained a 30 FPS cap, which would reduce heat buildup. Even at balanced preset, which targets 30 FPS at 1080p, frame pacing issues can drop performance to around 20 FPS during challenging scenes, making precise shots on bosses and zombies more difficult. Dropping the resolution to 900p completely eliminates these problems, providing a much better experience. That is, if you don't mind playing a game like this at 30 frames. I personally prefer playing a Resident Evil game at 60 FPS. I just find the game is much easier at a higher frame rate. Moving on, we have Alien Isolation. I love showcasing this game every year, as it's just a brilliant example of why we need more older AAA games like this on mobile. Just because, as I keep saying, they run exceptionally well. Isolation includes a few graphics preset options. On the performance preset, the game runs up to 60 FPS. On this phone, it targets 2097 by 967, which is a decent resolution. Feral Interactive told me years ago that they use contrast adaptive sharpening here, which creates excellent image quality even at low resolutions. They also don't use dynamic resolution scaling, so this is native 967p. The game looks fantastic and is able to mostly maintain 60 FPS, like the average FPS is definitely 60. The only noticeable performance dip occurs when using the flamethrower, where the GPU frame times can spike up to around 30 ms, which drops the frame rate to about 40. This doesn't happen all the time, but in this video I'm highlighting one of the most challenging late game scenes in Mission 14. This is in the Hive. It's really scary. Interestingly, while the phone reaches a thermal state of serious within just 7 minutes, the game still manages to maintain 60 FPS, which I think is really, really amazing. For dramatic comparison, here's the game running on an iPhone 12 Pro at performance preset. It almost immediately hits serious thermal state and frequently drops to 40 FPS during gameplay. Still, this is pretty good. This is Alien Isolation running on an A14 chip. Just think about that. This demonstrates how older AAA games from the early 2010s can still perform well on older mobile hardware. On the graphics preset, which targets 30 FPS, the game runs at the phone's native resolution. Dynamic resolution scaling is still not used, and the visuals are stunning. In fact, in both graphics and performance mode, this game looks considerably better than the PC and console versions. There are some frame pacing issues, but without a tool like the Metal HUD, you're not going to notice these. I really hope Feral considers adding 40 FPS support to the graphics preset. They target 40 FPS on most iPad Pros for this preset. For example, this is the iPad Pro with the A12Z chip running for the graphics preset. And it's doing very well. I believe the A19 Pro chip is more than powerful enough to handle this frame rate. Even if they have to slightly reduce the resolution, I really think it would be possible, and it would just really provide a really nice experience. Just personal take. Okay, so here is another older high-end game, Wreckfest. Although do keep in mind, this version is closer to the current gen versions on PS5, Xbox Series X and Series S in terms of graphics. The game runs really well and can now more comfortably play at max resolution. Handy Games told me that at extreme screen scaling, they target 83% resolution, meaning the game is actually running at roughly 2370 by 1096, which is still a very high resolution for a game like this to be running on a phone. I tested many tracks here, many, and for the most part, the game maintains 60 FPS, which is really, really good. The game can get demanding during big crashes. It's known for that, and the GPU may struggle briefly before quickly recovering to 16 ms in the frame interval, for example. The Glendale country track was the most challenging, with FPS dropping to about 30, even at lower resolutions. For this type of game, a locked FPS isn't always critical, depending on the mode you opt for, of course. From my point of view, this game is more about just enjoying the massive car crashes. Like, it's really fun. I love smashing cars. Like, when I was 14 or 15, I made this stupid video about smashed cars in a bush. You can look at it in the description. I love smashed cars.
No scratch mark at all. Then, this is the only car on the market at Peter Ford Overgrown Car Yard. So if you want this car, you have to run out of here as quick as you can. As you can see, it's upside down to attract the viewer's attention again. Something is missing in this car. Oh, it's just a CD player.
Anyway, you often just don't care if the frame rate is dropping just because you're just having such a good time smashing cars. Wreckfest also makes the iPhone 17 Pro Max extremely hot. Probably the hottest of any game I've tested so far. But the phone is still able to maintain 60 FPS on most tracks I've tested, except for the Glendale country track, but that is mostly just because that scene is hard to run in general. The performance is much better than what we experienced on the iPhone 16 Pro Max with A18 Pro, which generally stuck to 50 to 60 FPS and dropped more during big crashes. So this is still a very big jump in terms of performance. It's worth noting that the max FPS toggle doesn't currently work on any 120Hz iPhone, meaning we can't exceed 60 FPS on this device. Interestingly, I believe all iPad Pros with 120Hz display support over 60 FPS. For example, here is my M4 iPad Pro, which can easily reach 120 FPS at max graphics, and it looks great. I don't think this iPhone could achieve that at such a high resolution, but it might be possible at low settings. I don't know, but at the same time, I think pushing for such a high frame rate here is probably going to throttle this thing to unbelievable amounts of craziness. Anyway, even the A12Z iPad Pro can reach over 60 FPS, though at much lower video settings. All right, so our last game to look at is GTA San Andreas, the definitive edition. This is the the newer Unreal Engine 4 remake of the game, the mobile port is pretty locked down. You can only adjust the resolution scale and enable a few post-processing effects. It's also capped at 30 FPS, and the game also runs at Unreal Engine 4's default resolution on iPhone. This port behaves strangely on every mobile device due to frame pacing hiccups. Even during just general gameplay, such as exploring the world, FPS constantly fluctuates between different frame intervals. GPU frame times are so unusual. In some scenes, they drop below 20 ms, which suggests that 60 FPS would be possible if uncapped. In other moments, frame times can dip under 10 ms, which is really good. Or then they can suddenly spike up to 30 ms, which indicates that sustaining 60 FPS might be challenging. Lowering the resolution has little to no effect as well, which is kind of funny, and the game just doesn't look very good at lower resolutions. Anyway, these issues are common for Unreal Engine 4 games on mobile with frame pacing, so I wouldn't blame it solely on this port. I initially suspected that shader compilation might be the problem, but the HUD shows very low compiled shaders on launch, so that doesn't seem to be the cause. Similar behavior occurs even on the most powerful Apple mobile device, the M4 iPad Pro. It's all over the place. At the end of the day, it's hard to say if most players will notice these frame pacing issues. I think for many, probably not, you're not going to notice, but for those who are keen on tracking inconsistencies like this, it might stand out. What we can all agree on is that a 60 FPS toggle would be fantastic, though it's still unclear if the game could actually sustain 60 FPS as GPU frame time is just all over the place, as I've shown. And also, this game is just really fun. It doesn't really matter. I still have a good time. Alright, so that was testing some more games on my iPhone 17 Pro Max. Again, the vapor chamber thing here is really cool. The phone uses water and graphite fins to draw heat off the processor and into the unibody frame. And this really, really helps with thermals. Apple says this design improves heat dissipation and delivers a 40% sustained performance boost over the iPhone 16 Pro. And we saw some of this evidence in my last video, and it was really awesome. But as I keep saying, I just would like some more games. Like it would be really cool if Apple brought Cyberpunk to this phone. I actually think that it's possible here. Like, even at lower resolutions and a 30 FPS target, I think it could be possible. And that would really send a strong message that we want bigger games instead of all these recycled gacha games and free games that I just think are boring pieces of poppycock, boulder dash. Just rubbish.